So Flesh and Blood is a player's game, and as such, it is not uncommon to see significant shifts in the singles market following things that happen in the meta. Now, with the announcement of Project Blue and the ensuing excitement around that, we've also seen a similar phenomenon there as well. Folks making moves on long-shunned cold foils and special treatments alike. So today, let's talk about what's been moving and where there are potentially still some opportunities. You're watching Budget Format Fab on Dice Commando, your BFF for all things in budget Flesh and Blood. Coming to you midweek each week, these videos are possible thanks to the support of our channel members. If you want to get involved with the channel and join us on our community Discord, please consider joining as a member. You can be our BFF and show your support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving a comment. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, my Flesh and Blood friends, it's your BFF here on Dice Commando. Now, we may spend time talking budget formats here, but that doesn't mean that budget bling isn't still very much a thing. It absolutely is, and it's actually been interesting through the Commoner Crawl series that we do here in Portland. We've been doing it for, I think, about 3 years now. We've seen a huge shift in bling, so to speak, from when we first started. Now, when we first started, we were, it was 3 years ago, first off, but we were going to breweries. That's how we do the crawl. So when we first started, everyone's like, well, I'm just going to, get the cheapest deck possible in case something gets spilled on it or whatever it may be. Completely reasonable. But over the last 3 years, that started to evolve for certain people. Primarily, it makes sense, right? How many rainbow foils do you have from opening packs that aren't meta cards within True Constructed that just sit in a box somewhere, right? Where like, well, I'm not getting any use out of these cards. I may as well put them in my commoner deck, bling out my commoner deck, so to speak, right? And then as we moved farther down the line and people's Blitz heroes started LLing, right? And specifically towards Blitz because, it'd be the young hero, right? But as you start to see that, it's like, well, my rainbow foil hero, my cold foil hero, my Marvel hero that I can't play anymore, what's it just going to do? Sit in a box and not going to use it and get enjoyment out of it? Of course I am. And then you start to bring it to the table. So yes, we very much, even in budget formats, still like to have our bling and have it on the table. Now, that has been where the vast majority of the market mayhem, so to speak, has been with the announcement of Project Blue. Obviously, when that came out, tons of people in excitement. And there's a lot of good reasons to be excited about Project Blue. I think we all are, in maybe for different reasons. But I think we're all excited. But there's been some definite movement on pieces within the market. The most obvious of which have been the Blade Beckoner series. This is easily, obviously each one of them, depending on the slot that they're in, has different value. You see that the boots are significantly higher, primarily because Snapdragon Scalers is, at least currently, not legal within the format. So a lot of heroes have found themselves without boots, and that's why that piece is higher. But all of these were about $1 or $2, and I'm talking cold foil version here. All of these were like $1 or $2 headed into the announcement of Project Blue. And the demand of people forecasting for blue, people wanting to pick them up for blue, and then, obviously the hunted's just gone. So anyway, that's where a lot of the money's been going there. It's been very interesting. Now, another thing that has happened was Ice Eternal. And I do think this was mostly probably a small group of people. But you can see that Ice Eternal popped from, then this is specifically the Ice Eternal that was part of the LGS. So this was an Armory kit release. I think it was Waning Moon Ice Eternal, I think was in the same. It was Cold Foil, Waning Moon, and Ice Eternal, I'm pretty sure. But either way, once Icelander, these were flying around everywhere anyway, but once Icelander went away, it wasn't super high demand. You can see there it was selling for, 50 cents-ish. And we've seen a ton of sales. You can see the peak in sales, 250 of them moved in a day or something like that. Somebody was executing a buyout. There's still plenty of them around, to be clear, but someone was making a move on those. And you saw that it increased by 350%. Now, to be fair, that 350% represents $1 or $2. So, but again, you see there's definite movement and thoughts about what will be in high demand going forward. So those are the two that have gone up. Another one that did go up, but I don't think is worth it anymore, is Blossom of Spring. So Blossom of Spring, specifically the cold foil, this was also an Armory promo at one point, around Dorinthea versus Rhinar, was because that's when it came out, so that makes sense. This was selling for about $11 and has since gone up to just shy of 16. Now, this one I don't think is going to be in super high demand because we now have Old Knocker. Now, the exception there is Old Knocker Cold Foil is only in treasure packs, and right, so you get it. That one's crazy good, but I think folks are going to be playing Old Knocker as a card over Blossom of Spring by and large, because unless you care about your hero being tapped, which is a very small number of those at this point in time, Old Knocker is just functionally better because it's an instant, not an action. So I don't think, Blossom of Spring will continue its trend, but it is still very interesting. So let's talk places that I'm surprised we haven't seen movement. One of those is Beaten Trackers. So Beaten Trackers, the cold foil is out of Dynasty, and this has actually been, you see it looks like it's a decrease there, but functionally we're talking about moves from $1 to 80 cents. So like within a 20-cent range. That's flat-ish. It's not because, technically correct is always correct, or the best kind of correct. But, overall, if it's going to cost you $1, it's going to cost you $1, right? But this is one to pick up. I think Brutes have a very realistic place in Project Blue, especially Kayo, right? Access to pulping, Wild Ride. We've talked about that. Well, we already had Wild Ride, but pulping being a big one. Roughshod. I think Kayo is pretty. Anyway, Beaten Trackers, cold foil. If you want to play $1 for the cold foil, just add it to a cart when you're buying something else. Seems like a plan. Seems like a plan to me. And then what I have across the screen right now are just some others. You will notice a lot of these are from Dynasty. That's probably not an accident. But there's a couple interesting places that we could go look at pretty good cards within Project Blue. So Steelblade Buckler is $1, right? The Guardian backup shield. It's also a pretty card. I have one because I got it a long time ago. I was like, hey, this is cheap. So I picked it up a long time ago. $1 for Buckler. Heck yeah, man. Knucklehead, this is Kayo's Helm, right? This is a Temper 2, so 2-1. That's on top of Beaten Trackers, right? You can start looking at getting some pretty awesome things for Kayo. Unfortunately, I don't think the vast majority of us are going to be going after the cold foil strap, Barkbone. But, maybe one day when you hit the lottery. Mask of Three Tails, this was an LG, this was an Armory promo. This was one of the ones, I'm actually surprised this one's as cheap as it is, because I believe this is one of the ones where they shifted the Armory promos to be only 2 of, right? So it used to be in the olden days, you'd get 4 of the same cold foil, 1 for each week of the 4 armories allowed per month. And then after heavy hitters with the helms, they started switching to 2 different cold foils, meaning that, do the quick math, there's roughly half of them available as to the previous cold foils. So I'm pretty certain this was one of the 2. I'm pretty surprised that this is only $4, actually, because I do think that's pretty good within certain builds. Galvanic Bender, Battle-Worn 1 that does a thing. Okay, I don't know that we're going to be building any mechs, but it is still a Battle-Worn 1. Probably, in most cases, they're going to be playing the gauntlets, right? Because remember, Goliath gauntlets, not a thing. But so and by the gauntlets, I mean Blade Beckoner. That's what I meant. Wave of Reality, by the way, this is a really pretty cold foil. It's only sitting at about $1.80, $2. And then Gallantry Gold. This is obviously from Monarch. Wasn't a ton. Well, there was a ton of first edition Monarch, but not perceived. Anyway, I don't want to go into the whole thing. But $7 for cold foil Gallantry Gold. I do have to say, this one actually looks better, in my opinion, in rainbow foil. It happens sometimes. But from a rarity standpoint, obviously the cold foil is the bigger bling. So anyway, those are just a couple ideas I've had. I think by this point you get the general concept of where I'm going here. I'd love to hear your comments below. I'd like to read your comments below. What else out there? What other good opportunities? Or maybe don't tell us and go buy. I get it. I get the whole thing. But as we move to end this, I just want to remind everybody, right? I've been very public about my opinion on investing in things, right? Because I use that with air quotes intentionally, right? This is just going out and having fun with $1 or $3 or something like that. This is not something that's going to make you rich, right? If you go buy 1,000 Steelblade Bucklers at $1,000, probably, even if I guess if you double your money at $1,000, then great. But that's a lot of work of shipping and risk. And anyway, you got to do what makes sense to you. This is not about making money. This is not about speccing on the market. This is just trying to bling out your deck, so that you have something that you don't have to look at later and say, oh, well, it's $6 now. I wish I'd bought it when it was $1.80 or whatever it may be. So anyway, that's my piece today. Thanks for checking in, and go Commando.